How to get abs, supine fork put downs. I was recently on Threads, maybe a week ago at this point, and someone asked, what ab workout do y'all do to get rid of the stubborn belly pooch? Or pouch, she said. And I said supine fork put downs. And I ended up getting like a lot of feedback. People were laughing, of course, I'm half joking. But I think, probably the most common goal people have, at least initially, fitness goal people have, is to get or to see their abs for the first time. And I do think it's a worthy goal to pursue, even though it's seemingly shallow. I do think there's something to be said about actually trying and then successfully achieving that. That being, if that's a goal of yours, I digress. That being said, I want to talk about how I would go about getting or seeing my abs for the first time. And I think the pieces people usually miss. So the first aspect is, of course, diet, which is why I said supine fork put downs. Obviously, it's to eat less food. I think people underestimate how much food they eat. And it's because people don't eat correctly. The average American is overweight. The average American is consuming highly processed, calorie-dense junk foods for most of their diet. And I don't think people are aware of how calorically dense these foods are and how easy they are to overeat. An example I like to give is you eating a family-size bag of Lay's chips or you eating 8 to 10 boiled potatoes, right? It's going to feel very different, you eating the chips versus you eating the potatoes. You probably aren't actually going to be able to finish 8 to 10 boiled potatoes. That is unlikely. But it is very, very easy to overeat a bag of chips or to eat an entire bag of chips, which is anywhere from 13 to 1,500 calories, probably even more. It's probably closer to 2,000 calories. So you have a day's worth of food calorically in a family-sized bag of chips versus you eating 8 to 10 boiled potatoes, which is, I just Googled it real quick, which is 880 to 1,110 calories for 8 to 10 potatoes. So you have half, if not less, the calories eating all those potatoes than you do eating a family-size bag of Lay's chips. That's insane. And that, I think there's something to be said about that distinction. And this is why I'm not a huge fan of the whole if it fits your macros in calorie counting approach. Not because calories don't count, not because calories don't matter, not because it doesn't work, not for any of those things. But I think doing that, I think counting calories for most people, in my experience, it creates a separation between their eating behaviors and whatever their fitness goal is, whatever their body composition goal is. And what I mean by that is when you approach eating with, it's just the calories, it's just if it fits into my macros, it's just if it fits into my daily or weekly caloric intake, it doesn't matter. You're seeing the forest for the trees. Because the reason you even have to micromanage your eating behavior is because your eating behavior doesn't align with what your actual goal is. Which is why when a lot of people, they calorie count, it works because it does work. They lose the weight, they lose the fat, they're happy with, their physique. Then they stop calorie counting and they put the weight back on because they don't know how to eat. It's your eating behavior that's the problem. And I think if people addressed their eating behaviors, if people addressed how they eat, they wouldn't need to count calories because their physique would be a natural consequence of how they eat. So let's go over how you should approach eating, how you can adjust your eating behaviors to make your fat loss goal, your weight loss goal effortless. For now, I think it's probably best just to focus on fat loss, and I can do another video on building muscle and how I would approach that. But I think the video would just be too long trying to do both. So starting this out, I already mentioned to you that highly processed junk foods are very calorically dense and they are very easy to overeat. That is not a good combination. So the first change you want to make to how you eat and how you approach your diet is by switching to a primarily whole foods, nutrient-dense diet. So what does that mean? You're prioritizing single ingredient foods, meats, potatoes, like I mentioned, fish, yogurt, eggs, vegetables, fruits, the list goes on, rice, whatever. You're prioritizing single ingredients foods and you're prioritizing nutrient-dense foods. So think about meats and think about fruits and veggies, primarily veggies in terms of the micronutrient density. If you make this simple switch and you prioritize these types of foods versus, the highly processed, calorie-dense foods, you will lose weight with just that switch. You didn't have to count anything. You didn't have to track anything. You didn't have to weigh anything. You're just changing how you eat. Now, once you make that a habit, we can get a little bit more specific on what your diet looks like. This is when I would consider adding more protein. So you want to have a high protein diet. Consider adding more fiber, so more fruits and veggies, and less of those starchy carbs, so like maybe less rice, less potatoes. You want to make sure you're getting enough fats, so that's your nuts, seeds, avocados. Your fats are very important for your hormonal health. And I've never seen anyone do well on a low-fat diet, so I just would not even suggest it. And in terms of satiety, fats paired with protein is going to be your best bet. Not that carbs are bad, not that you shouldn't consume carbs, still consume carbs. But from a satiety perspective, protein paired with fat, so if you think beef and butter, for example, that is going to keep you very, very full. And then I would add water. So just make sure you're consuming and drinking enough water. Many times we think that we are hungry and we're just thirsty. So those are 3 more things you should do to change your eating behavior, to change how you eat. Those things again are going to help you lose weight without you having to micromanage anything. You're just making these simple switches, this simple perspective change, these simple habit changes in how you approach your diet. Primarily whole foods, prioritize protein, prioritize fiber, prioritize your water intake. That alone, for the average person, is going to make a huge difference in the amount of calories you're consuming. And the great part about this is you're not going to feel like you're eating less, because these foods that I listed, in comparison to these highly processed foods, tend to be low calorie, but higher in volume. So the best example I can give is something like a salad. The volume, you're able to have a huge bowl of salad for minimal amount of calories. Usually people mess up the salads in terms of caloric intake with the dressing, so you want to be careful with things like that. But you're able to fill your stomach up and feel that, the feeling of fullness, which is usually what people are seeking when they're in a fat loss phase, because you are eating less calories. That being said, I think it would be remiss if I didn't mention that fats are more calorically dense. So you don't want to skimp on them. You don't want to not eat fats because they're more calorically dense, which is something that I see people say, like, oh, don't forget, like, don't have peanut butter, don't have nuts because they're so high in calories and you're trying to lose weight and you want to cut your calories. No, your body needs fat. You need fats hormonally. You need fats for your joints. Fats are their macronutrient, which means you need them. So don't avoid them. Like I said, I've never seen anyone do well on a low-fat diet, but be aware that they are calorically dense. For every gram of fat, there's 9 calories. So 1 cashew, for example, is 9 calories. So you probably shouldn't have 1, 2, 3 handfuls of cashews. You probably should count out maybe 10 to 12 and snack on that. Nuts are actually a very good snack, and I'll put a really interesting study below. I won't over expand on that because I don't want this video to be too long. But you just need to be aware that fats are more calorically dense. When you're putting butter into your beef, for example, or if you're cooking with oils, just be aware. don't, let's just use some common sense. Nothing needs to be micromanaged, but the awareness is very important. The next thing in terms of fat loss, once these 4 things are a habit, once you are eating primarily whole foods, once you are prioritizing protein, once you are prioritizing fiber and water, then you can decide if you want to continue losing weight or if you feel comfortable with where you are. I think a lot of people making these very simple changes will be very happy with where they are with their body composition. But if you want to get leaner, if you want to lose more body fat, then we need to start manipulating calories. And the most effective way, and why I'm saying it's the most effective way, is because people can adhere to it, is to start cutting out meals. I tell people to first start with snacks, cut out the snacking. Honestly, you probably don't need snacks. And if you feel like you need snacks, your meals aren't being designed in the proper way. But first, cut out the snacks. Very easy calories right there. Snacks are probably anywhere from 100 to 300 calories. And if you're snacking twice a day, for example, that's 200 to 600 additional calories per day that you're consuming that you honestly don't need. It's probably more of a habit. You're used to snacking. So start there. Once you cut out the snacks, if you want to continue cutting calories, again, at any point, if you are happy with how your body looks, if you're happy with your body composition, feel free to stop. But if you would like to continue losing body fat, then you want to start cutting meals, and this is where the fasting comes in. For fasting, I suggest you put your window so that you're either skipping breakfast or you are skipping dinner. And you could call it that. You could call it skipping breakfast or dinner. You could call it fasting. It's really neither here nor there for me. But that's how I would design your window. I suggest you start with a 16-8 fasting protocol. So you're fasting for 16 hours, eating within an 8-hour window, and you can progress to an 18-6, which is what I do on a daily basis. I fast for 18 hours and I eat within a 6-hour window. And right now I'm actually testing something out, a different protocol. I'm skipping dinner instead of breakfast to see how I feel. Just because I've noticed for myself, anecdotally, the earlier I eat dinner, the better I sleep, the better I feel the next day in terms of energy, just upon waking up. So I just am playing around with this new protocol. That being said, all this really is doing in terms of calorie manipulation is cutting out meals. You're going from 3 meals a day to 2 meals a day, or 4 meals a day to 3 meals a day. And that is probably the easiest way to cut calories without having to micromanage or overthink it. Instead of making each meal a little bit smaller, all your meals get to be the same size. You're just removing one of those. And in terms of adherence, in my personal experience with my clients, this seems to be the most effective way to cut calories without having to make it a full-time job. Because if you are overthinking fat loss, if you are making this process a complicated one, I promise it's not something that you're ever going to stick to. And even if you achieve your results, they are not going to be sustainable. This process is simple. Fat loss is simple, and it can be easy and effortless if you're following a plan that's designed to be easy and effortless. And the one I just laid out to you, where you are simply changing your eating behaviors, you are adopting better eating habits, and then you are manipulating calories in a very simple way, I find this to be the most effective way to lose body fat, which is going to lead to you finally seeing your abs. As I say, abs are built in the gym, but they are revealed in the kitchen. And I think most people have body fat that they can lose first before they should even worry about building them. Of course, this is contextual. It depends where your starting point is. But I think it's important to dial in diet first, because your diet is going to affect so much more beyond your body composition. It's just going to affect how you function, how you perform, how you feel, and so on. So dialing in your diet, adopting better eating behaviors will improve your quality of life beyond the aesthetics. And that's what this really is all about. Now we can get into building. I don't know where this myth started that abs are built in the kitchen. It doesn't even make sense, because for any other muscle group, if you want to build that muscle group, if you want to grow your glutes or your quads or your biceps, people tell you to start training them and to build them in the gym. But when it comes to abs, people are like, no, it's just diet. It's not just diet. Diet is a huge part of it. And I think for the average person, that's probably where they should start. But there's a bunch of people who are already quite lean, who are already, you could call them skinny, and they should be able to see their abs, but they don't, because there's nothing there. There is no musculature to reveal. They revealed them with the kitchen. They did the diet, and they look at their stomach and they're like, wait, what? Like, my stomach is flat, but I don't see muscle definition. I don't see abs. What I suggest people do is to train their abs, train your abs like you would any other muscle group, like any other muscle group I just mentioned, your glutes, your quads, your biceps. Train them with progressive overload consistently 2 to 3 days per week. Train them in different ranges of motion, use different exercise variations, challenge them. Don't just use body weight. Body weight is great for your abs, and you can get great abs just using body weight, but use weights, overload them, challenge them. Ab training should be just as hard as your training for any other muscle group. Like I said, they're not special. If you're looking for an ab training program, I have one that's open access, and I'll link it down below. 4-day per week ab program, and I promise if you do this for the next 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks, you are going to see a huge difference in how your abs look. Anecdotally, once I started training my abs, it's honestly a night and day difference, and I'll never go back to not training them, because I myself fell into the trap of I just have to diet down, and I did, and I do think I probably needed to lose a few pounds of body fat, but I got into this trap where I was like, I don't think I could eat less. I don't think I could diet down more, because I'm already pretty lean. And at the time, I didn't realize it was because I hadn't trained them. But, through my own learning, through my own studying, through experience, I finally came to the conclusion of like, dude, you've never trained your abs. Why would you be able to see them? So save your time. Don't be like me. Train your abs with progressive overload, full ranges of motion, different exercise variations. Be consistent with it 2 to 3 days a week. Like I said, the one I have below is 4 days per week. So you'll see results a little bit faster doing that. And that will get you that athletic, lean, tone midsection that you're looking for, on top of you leading out through diet. So I'll leave this one here. There's a lot of information in this. But again, information is worthless if you don't use it. So apply it. You can check the link below for the open access ab training program. If you're looking for a general minimalist training program, I have the Basel 4x4 training system. I'll link that below as well. And I also do one-to-one coaching. If that's something you're interested in, I have the details for that below. And I will see you in the next one.